In my last video, when we talked about game preservation, we discussed Critical Geek and what I believe is his misunderstanding of game development and game preservation. But there was one part of this conversation that I never really considered at the time, and recent events surrounding Grand Theft Auto 6 have forced me to think about it: video game vigilantism. Because what we're seeing now goes beyond people criticizing a company, refusing to buy its products, organizing a boycott, or advocating for better game preservation. What we have here is someone actively trying to hurt a company because they disagree with a business decision that company made. And I want to make something clear. I understand the concerns. I understand why people are worried about physical media disappearing. I understand the concerns about digital ownership, game preservation, digital pre-orders, servers shutting down, and consumers potentially losing access to games they paid for. Those are legitimate conversations that the gaming industry needs to have. But having a legitimate grievance does not automatically make every response to that grievance legitimate. When you start hacking companies, leaking unfinished games, releasing material developers intended to keep private, and threatening to continue doing it until a company gives you what you want, we've entered completely different territory. There is a difference between holding a corporation accountable and deciding that you personally have the authority to punish that corporation until it does what you demand. You can support game preservation. You can oppose the disappearance of physical media. You can criticize Rockstar and Take-Two. You can do all of those things while recognizing that digital vigilantism is not the answer. Now, why Rockstar has chosen to move away from physical media is very important when we're framing what this leaker is trying to do. None of us have to like this decision. I'm somebody who understands why people want physical games to continue existing. But we should at least understand the business reasoning behind the decision before talking about how people are responding to it. For starters, the gaming industry has been moving toward digital distribution for years. Take-Two has acknowledged that the overwhelming majority of its business is already digital. From the company's perspective, they're looking at the numbers and seeing where the industry and their customers have already been heading. There are also obvious financial advantages. When you're producing physical games, somebody has to manufacture those discs, produce the packaging, ship everything around the country and around the world, and get those copies onto store shelves. Digital distribution removes a lot of that physical production and distribution process. Then there's the used game market. We've all done it. You buy a game, finish it, and maybe you trade it in or sell it to somebody else. That person might eventually sell it again. But Rockstar and Take-Two only make money from that original new copy. If I buy GTA 6, finish it, and sell my disc to somebody else, Rockstar doesn't get another cut from that transaction. If that person sells it to somebody else, Rockstar doesn't get money from that transaction either. With a digital download code, that secondary market largely disappears. Once that code has been redeemed, you can't simply hand that copy to your friend, sell it online, or trade it into GameStop like you could with a traditional disc. From a consumer perspective, I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. But from a business perspective, I understand why a publisher would prefer it. There's another factor here too: control. Physical copies give consumers and retailers considerably more control over a product after it has been sold. They can lend it, resell it, rent it, discount remaining inventory, or preserve that copy years after the original release. Digital distribution shifts much more of that control toward the publisher and the platform. There's even an argument surrounding leaks. Physical games have to be manufactured and shipped before release day, which means copies can potentially get into people's hands early. A digital code that doesn't provide access until the publisher allows it removes that particular avenue for an early leak. Considering what's happening with GTA 6 right now, there's obviously some irony there. Getting rid of discs might make physical leaks more difficult, but it doesn't magically prevent hackers from stealing and releasing digital material. Understanding why Rockstar made this decision is not the same thing as agreeing with it. There are legitimate reasons to criticize an all-digital future. There are legitimate questions about ownership, game preservation, lending games to friends, the used game market, internet requirements, and what happens when digital storefronts eventually shut down. Those conversations need to happen. But understanding the company's reasoning is important, because once we understand why they're doing it, we can have an actual conversation about whether those practices should change. That's completely different from saying, I don't like what this company is doing, therefore I'm going to hack them and punish them until they give me what I want. Now let's actually discuss the leaker, because this is where you start to lose me. It does not look good to say that you want Rockstar to produce physical copies of GTA 6, or else you're going to continue leaking parts of the game. It looks even worse when you start threatening to release even more material, including cutscenes, if Rockstar and Take-Two refuse to respond to you. At that point, you're not having a conversation anymore. You're trying to force their hand. That doesn't make you look like some champion of consumer rights. It makes you look unhinged and uncontrollable. The frustrating part is that you actually have legitimate concerns. People don't want physical media to disappear. I don't want physical media to disappear. I am a collector of sorts myself. I understand why people are worried about what an all-digital future means for ownership, preservation, used games, lending games to friends, and what happens when servers or storefronts eventually shut down. And to be fair, CyberLeek's complaints go beyond physical media. They're also talking about digital pre-orders, single-player content being locked behind DLC, and games losing functionality when servers eventually shut down. Again, some of those conversations are worth having. Say what you will about me, but I am someone with legitimate concerns about where this industry is heading. All you have done is make my argument and the arguments of other people who care about physical media harder to defend because you decided to take matters into your own hands. And this is something I don't think you've considered. You're potentially hurting the very movement you're supposedly trying to help. Because when legitimate game preservation advocates go to lawmakers, publishers, developers, or ordinary consumers and try to explain why ownership and preservation matter, what do you think happens when their movement starts getting associated with hackers threatening companies and promoting cryptocurrency? Instead of talking about ownership, offline access, preservation, and consumer rights, we're now talking about hackers, threats, leaks, and meme coins. You're giving companies something they can point toward and say this is what these people are like. And that's incredibly unfair to the people who have spent years trying to make these arguments legitimately. It's gotten to the point where even Stop Killing Games has come out against what you're doing. Think about that for a second. Stop Killing Games shares some of the same concerns you're supposedly fighting for. They want consumers to maintain access to games they've purchased. They care about preservation. They care about games becoming unplayable when companies shut down servers. And even they are looking at what you're doing and saying this isn't helping. They have condemned using illegal means to push these ideas and have specifically warned people not to send money to the people behind these leaks. That should tell you something. Then we have the cryptocurrency. And this is where you really start losing me. While presenting yourself as some kind of consumer advocate fighting against anti-consumer practices, you're simultaneously promoting a cryptocurrency using the attention generated by GTA 6 leaks. The leaked material itself has reportedly included QR codes and promotional material pointing people toward this cryptocurrency. I'm sorry, but that immediately raises questions about your motivations. You can't tell me you're doing this selflessly on behalf of consumers while using stolen GTA 6 attention to advertise something that could potentially benefit you financially. Maybe you genuinely believe in game preservation. I can't read your mind. Maybe you genuinely believe everything you're saying about consumer rights. But the second you're using GTA 6 leaks to promote something you can potentially financially benefit from, people have every right to start asking whether this is activism or marketing. You claim this isn't a cash grab. Fine. But putting a cryptocurrency alongside your supposed consumer rights crusade isn't exactly helping your case. And that brings me to my biggest question. Who appointed you? Who appointed you the leader of everyone who cares about physical media? Who appointed you the spokesperson for game preservation? Who gave you the authority to decide that because you disagree with Rockstar's decision, everybody else waiting patiently for GTA 6 now has to risk having parts of the game spoiled? Because that's another part of this that gets lost. You're not only hurting Rockstar, you're potentially hurting the players. There are millions of people who have been waiting years for this game. Some of them probably agree with you about physical media, but they still don't want cutscenes leaked. They don't want story details spoiled. They don't want unfinished material dumped onto the internet because somebody decided that their personal crusade was more important than everybody else's experience. And people saying just avoid the leaks are ignoring how the internet works. You can avoid actively searching for GTA 6 leaks and still get spoiled. Somebody can put something in a YouTube thumbnail. Somebody can put a story detail in a title. Somebody can post a screenshot on Twitter. Somebody can throw something into a comment section. Once major story information gets onto the internet, you can't control where it spreads. And now this situation could potentially be even more serious. Recent footage appears to suggest that whoever is behind these leaks may have access to some form of playable build of GTA 6. Nint. If that's genuine, we're not simply talking about somebody possessing a handful of pre-recorded gameplay clips anymore. We're potentially talking about somebody having enough access to deliberately seek out material they want to leak. Nint. That could mean missions, that could mean cutscenes, that could mean characters, that could potentially mean major story details. I'm being careful here because we don't know exactly what they have access to or how complete that build is. Nint. But that's exactly why threatening to release more material is so irresponsible. You're effectively telling millions of people that if Rockstar doesn't give you what you want, you're willing to potentially ruin parts of their experience too. And somehow you're calling that consumer advocacy. And what happens if your actions make things worse behind the scenes? What happens when Rockstar and Take-Two have to spend time investigating where the breach came from, tightening security, issuing takedowns, and figuring out who has access to their material? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that these leaks are going to delay GTA 6, because we do not have evidence of that. But we do know that Take-Two is taking the situation seriously enough to pursue information connected to the distribution of these leaks. So at the absolute minimum, you're creating another problem that developers and the company now have to deal with months before one of the biggest game launches in history. Mint. For what? Because you decided that your position gives you the right to act on behalf of everybody else? That's not consumer advocacy. That's vigilantism. You took a legitimate concern shared by collectors, preservationists, and ordinary consumers and appointed yourself judge, jury, and executioner. And in doing so, you've potentially made the people you're supposedly fighting for look worse. So congratulations. You've made yourself an asshole to the company you're attacking, an asshole to the developers whose unfinished work you're leaking, and an asshole to the millions of people who have patiently waited for this game, including many of us who actually agree with you that losing physical media is a problem. And that's the irony of this entire situation. I agree with some of your concerns. Stop Killing Games agrees with some of your concerns. Collectors agree with some of your concerns. People worried about digital ownership agree with some of your concerns. You didn't need to convince us that there's a problem, but instead of helping us make that argument, you've made it harder. Because now instead of discussing what happens to our games when servers shut down, or what an all-digital future means for ownership, we're discussing GTA 6 leaks, hacking, threats, spoilers, and a cryptocurrency. You aren't helping my argument, you're making it harder. We can fight for physical media. We can fight for game preservation. We can criticize corporations for anti-consumer decisions. We can do all of that without appointing ourselves the representatives of millions of players. And we can damn sure do it without ruining the game for everybody else. Critical Geek, these are the people you want to support. I hope you are proud of these leaks happening over the reasons you don't understand, cucumber-loving bitch.